This is Melissa, and it is the 28th day of June, 2026. I hope that everyone is doing well. I've had a good week. I got to meet again with some listeners who are nearby. They're about 20 minutes away from me. And I met them in the spring, and I was able to have a nice, long, leisurely conversation with them this afternoon. And it's great to meet people face to face. We also had the first book club meeting on Zoom of Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma, and that was a really good conversation too. And it was interesting, before we started recording there, we were talking about the fact that some of us have been able to meet each other in faraway places in Europe, in the UK, here in Texas. And I think the important thing is finding ways to take on life and not be spoon-fed bad news. And, Alan mentions in this Redux that I'm about to put up that socialism is great because it keeps us as children not having to make big decisions. And actually life has got a lot of challenges. There's things that have to be fixed and repaired and paid for in your life. Relationships come and go. Families have tensions. People become ill. This is reality. And if you have people that you can call and talk to and discuss options, and they're real people, and I'm not minimizing contacts that I have made online, but face-to-face contacts, and even some of the face-to-face contacts I have come from online. So it's good. But anyway, it was a good week, and I hope that you had a good week too. I am going to play a Redux for you from September 10, 2007. Speaking of 10, I think I mentioned that last week. This is the 10th episode, number 10, that Alan did on RBN Radio. Dominant minority and passive majority versus sentient minority. In this conversation that I had with my new listener friends, we were talking about, I hate to use the word levels, but we're talking about people that you meet who may think that they understand what's going on, or, I woke up on such and such a day, and they can talk about a few things. They understand a few things. For instance, they didn't like to wear a mask, or they don't think anybody went, there was no moon landing, or, whatever. Just pick one from a box. But it's all really the lowest place, the lowest level, the lowest breaking away from the mainstream. And so in a way, it is not breaking away at all. It's part of the passive majority. Because, so you can talk about viruses, germ theory versus terrain theory, whatever, but what are you actually doing? Therefore, you're still passive, because chit-chatting about it online isn't doing anything. It's the changes that you make in your own mind, in your own heart. It's what you do for yourself, and then therefore for others. This was my own encounter with Alan's work, was how it moved me to change attitudes and behaviors and locations, as it turned out. If you're listening to Clear FM, the radio associated with the light paper, then you may have heard this recently, but it's such a good talk that I decided to play it as the Redux. So again, September 10, 2007, dominant minority and passive majority versus sentient minority. And I will more or less let you, not really highlight anything in here. You'll get to it soon enough. But in listening to it and then reading through it again and wanting to talk about some things that might relate to it, I dived into the news. I dived in to see what was going on, if there's anything important. And I've been sharing with you lately that I'm actually not finding that much either in the news or in the alternative response to the news that I find worth thinking about or talking about. Now, that's an interesting way to think about it, a response to the mainstream. And so, again, back to conversations that I've had recently, including today with listeners, if you are in that world where you're talking about what's been put out for you to talk about, and this man that I was speaking with today said, it's revelation of the method. Absolutely. And we have so much going on. And we talked at great length about what is now acceptable for us to be talking about, what has now become acceptable in the mainstream. And he said, my rule of thumb is if it's in the mainstream, and that would include the Epstein files, that includes things, he specifically said Candace Owens, but we're talking here about a group of people or a country that it is authorized to hate. Now, it's authorized for some people. Look at the Bill C-9 that just passed in Canada that I mentioned, I think, maybe last week. When I talked about this right after October 7, I talked about Gog and Magog. And you might recall, if you were around for George W. Bush, this is justifying the Iraq War. And this is right where we are again. So George W. Bush, he brought up biblical prophecies regarding Gog and Magog, and this was his justification. And so I brought that up a couple of years ago and talked about dispensationalism and the creation of Christian Zionism, and how there's now a religious justification for what is going on. And we saw that in Iran, this amazing support for craziness because it's prophesied. And it's just so easy to play on people who don't understand what's really happening. So, but back to the point was, it's authorized for you to talk about. Everyone now can talk about, and we're given, certain key people in the media that say, yep, that country over there, those people over there, that's safe, that's acceptable to talk about. So you have to back up just a little bit and say, why? Why? Has Israel served its purpose in the Middle East? Is it now time for the Belt and Road Initiative? It's all lined up and ready to go, and it's going to be a changing of the guard. We have China all set up. They've had the manufacturing for years. So is it simply time? Now is the time, as the Masons say. So we didn't think, did we really, that this memorandum of understanding, even though, on the face of it, it looks like a defeat to the U.S., or there's lots of, 3D chess ways that you can look at it. But here from June 26, Reuters, U.S. strikes Iran in response to attack on cargo ship in Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. military attacked Iran on Friday in response to an Iranian drone strike on a cargo ship in the Strait of Hormuz, with each country accusing the other of violating terms of a ceasefire agreed on last week. U.S. Central Command said aircraft struck missile and drone storage locations and coastal radar sites, later publishing a grainy black and white video of an explosion labeled unclassified. They're always grainy videos where you can't really see anything. I remember after 9/11, Bush sent in people to weed out Al-Qaeda, and they were on the hunt for Osama bin Laden. So we've got drawings and these are like slices of the mountain with elaborate tunnel systems. And this is where Al-Qaeda are hiding out, and they think Osama bin Laden is hiding out there. It's like, how do you get a cross-section of dirt in an artist rendition? And same thing, they showed that after, October 7, the Israelis showed drawings of where Hamas was hiding out. It's elaborate underground tunnel system. They had a combination there of grainy video where they showed the same entrance to a tunnel over and over again. And then they had the drawings. So it's just recycled. It's rehashed. That's what we get over and over. And as I've said, it's just, I don't know. I think for me, it's time to, in many, many ways, look for something else to study and think about. And I am really getting a lot out of reading Morals and Dogma. I'm just claiming my mind against the constant onslaught of repetitive so-called news. But in bringing you a couple of things that have happened in the last week, Alan Greenspan passed away. He was 100 years old. And he was the former chairman of the Federal Reserve. And I remembered that he had said lots of, well, we'll just say colorful, crazy things over the years. And so I'm just going to read you some Alan Greenspan quotes in memory of the man. But first I wanted to just think about his name, his surname, Greenspan, the measure of the green, the width of the green, the measure of your money. I can tell you that my Greenspan, I could probably just put a piece of copying paper between that measure of my greens, that Greenspan. The measure of my money is very narrow. So here's one. I know you think you understand what you thought I said, but I'm not sure you realize that what you heard is not what I meant. Then he said, I guess I should warn you. If I turn out to be particularly clear, you've probably misunderstood what I said. And this has come up recently in a couple of conversations that I've had, is the absolute crystal clarity of Alan Watt. The way that he communicated in his words, in his writing. Not a fancy talker, a plain talker. Just telling us like it is. And that's because it's truth. This is another little interesting thing that I picked up in Morals and Dogma, is the need to conceal. Always be concealing. I think that's ABC. That was from Glengarry Glen Ross. Always be closing. Well, always be concealing is the method by which they control us. Alan Greenspan also said, people do not realize in the U.S., for example, how tenuous our ties to international energy are. That is, we on a daily basis require continuous flow. If that flow is shut off, it causes catastrophic effects in the industrial world. And it's that which made Saddam Hussein far more important to get out than bin Laden. Now that's an interesting thing, just looking back to 9/11. If you recall, Bush sent troops in to get Saddam Hussein. So supposedly they're looking for bin Laden, who's the mastermind of the attack on the Twin Towers, et cetera, et cetera. And they're going to get him in Afghanistan. But immediately, simultaneously, troops are sent into Iraq. Why? Because he's a bad man. Saddam Hussein is a bad man. Well, there's a bit of honesty there. If that flow is shut off, it causes catastrophic effects on the industrial world. Well, we know that the U.S. can actually supply its own energy needs, so there's a lot more going on than that, but that's kind of a true thing. Now, I was looking at something Alan talked about was DNA databases. And I came up with this article from June 25, 2026 from Gizmodo. The company trying to bring back the mammoth just teamed up with the U.S. government. The biotech startup that's promised to de-extinct the woolly mammoth has partnered with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to preserve America's endangered species before they die off. America currently protects 1,662 domestic and 638 foreign species under the 1973 Endangered Species Act. But despite a sterling reputation for rescuing national icons like the bald eagle, the grizzly, and, my friend, the American alligator, this work has ironically been stunted by a 300% increase in species added to the list since 1985. Federal funding hasn't kept pace, diluting the resources needed to protect each of these species roughly by half. But a new public-private partnership between the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the FWS, and self-described de-extinction startup Colossal Biosciences promises to fill that gap. Colossal, through its recently erected nonprofit, the Colossal Foundation, has pledged to collaborate with federal researchers on a sprawling project to collect, sequence, and preserve the genetic material of over 2,300 threatened and endangered plant and animal species. So it goes on to talk about how this is being bankrolled by $100 million in donations since it incorporated late 2024. And the idea of it, the bio vault, and I'm just scrolling down a little bit, just as the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, remember Alan Watt talking about that a lot and reading plenty of articles about it, was created to preserve the genetic diversity of our food supply. This partnership aims to preserve the genetic diversity of life itself, Lamb said in a statement. This partnership is about ensuring that future generations inherit not just records of the natural world, but the opportunity to protect, study, and restore it. A couple of things came to mind, and the first was, what did Stuart Brand have to do with this? Because you might remember Stuart Brand, Alan talked about him. He came up in a variety of ways, but primarily around a documentary that Alan recommended called Das Net. And this was the net, Unabomber, LSD, and Internet. And it's a fascinating look at the conjunction of the sex, drugs, and rock and roll being introduced and the creation of the Internet. And Stuart Brand played he's actually called the godfather of Silicon Valley, so you can look him up. But it doesn't appear that he's involved in that company, but he is still on the go well into his 80s, and this is from something that he does have something to do with called reviverestore.org. And this is the woolly mammoth revival. In 2013, Revive and Restore organized the first public meeting on de-extinction to bring together scientists across the globe working to revive lost species. And it talks about how Stuart Brand is really the one who coined or popularized the term or the word de-extinction. So something there perhaps of interest for you. But as I was thinking about the mind-bombedness, the overwhelm that is part of the technique that we're hammered with day in and day out. And you see, the reason why I'm hammering on it is because you can't actually be an individual if you are participating in the media circus, even if it is the so-called alternative or truther or dissident. I took a quick peek at some of the alternative news articles that had come into my email, and I'm not that keen really on, dropping names or pointing you to something that I don't really agree with. I will just say that there's a constant thread. This is part of what I call she blinded me with science technique. And it seems very important always in the alternative world to continue to point out incredible detail around the Wuhan lab leak, Fauci crimes, gain of function, COVID operation, the lies of it all, the mass propaganda. And it's just, I understand how people get trapped there like a fly on sticky tape, because it seems that it will be important that if you can get enough of these facts in your mind, then you will be able to what? Convince a relative who's dead asleep and happy about it, who's just playing their life away to what? Take an interest in this. It isn't actually real world. Real world is when you've looked at things for yourself. We don't need that kind of what they call granular detail. The simplicity of the way Alan puts the agenda across, that is, it makes it very clear. It makes it very easy to sort of soar above that media overwhelm, that technique, and just get, to soar and look down and go, okay, I see what they're doing here. You don't have to fall into it. You don't have to prove anything. The one thing that Alan would say about the need to do that is, there's the ego. There's the ego in action. I'm the one who's going to be able to show you that this whole entire operation was a fraud. I'm the one who's going to be able to show you that there was no pandemic, there was no lab leak, there was, et cetera, et cetera. And then before you know it, you have spent years of your life trying to accumulate enough information, collate it, put it in the right order so that you can give it to whom are you giving it to? To whom do you think you can provide enough damning evidence, the smoking gun, that is going to either pivot the people who are doing this agenda away from doing that, or enlighten your friends and neighbors? I spoke with a man not that long ago who told me that, he did try to talk out, he did try to tell everyone that he knew, all of his friends and all of his family, including his wife and his children, not to take the you-know-what. He felt morally compelled to do that. And so he is now in a position of having no friends, no family, no wife, and no children who talk to him. I'm not saying he did the wrong thing. He did what his conscience told him to do. But I am reminded of what I've heard Alan say on quite a few occasions. People make a choice, or they make a series of choices not to know. They don't want to know. That's what socialism is. That's what playing your life away is. You don't want to know the bad news. And he said, that is a choice they've made. You've got to respect that choice and leave them to it. Now, that may be an approach that some of you don't agree with, don't want to take, wouldn't want to take, but I am putting it there as an option. The hope is that we are all adults. And so as adults, we make decisions and we live with the consequences. Sometimes we make the right decision for us. Sometimes we make mistakes. We mess up, and then we suffer the consequences. If we try to make decisions for other people, then are we treating other people like children? Well, I've got to educate them. I have to tell them. Again, I'm reminded of what Alan said to me quite a bit. People have a choice. Throughout their lifetime, they have many, many opportunities to know the truth, because when I first arrived to Canada, I was very sad for the people. I was very sad for the victims of this agenda. I shed tears. And he said, "You can't do that. Then you will be a casualty. You have to accept that this is an ancient war, an ancient system, and there are always casualties. You accept it." So the kind of misinformation, I was thinking today about Alan saying on air after 9/11, from here on out, the hardest thing will be to hang on to your sanity. And when you accept that, I'm putting air quotes around the word reality, when you accept that your reality is given to you by, a combination of things, the education that you get, the religion that you have as a child, the friends and family in your network, the way that you were brought up, your socioeconomic place in life will have certain determining characteristics for you. This is just the way it is, so some are more equal than others, and we all have things where we have certain advantages and disadvantages, but it's all part of the system. I don't care if you were born into a wealthy family or born into a poor family or born into a family that is historically been oppressed because of its race, or you were born into a family that has been oppressed because of their religious beliefs, or you were born into a family that dominated for one reason or another. No matter what, you're born into the system. I was speaking with my new friends today about intergenerational bureaucrats, intergenerational academics. People are, born to a couple of academics, and they want to be an academic themselves because that's the world they grow up in. Alan talked about a bureaucrat that he met in Canada who had been born to parents who were bureaucrats. She was taken to school, a special, nice, fancy private school, every day by a chauffeur-driven limousine. Some servant laid out her clothes, some cook made her breakfast, some driver took her to school. Her life was completely managed. She went to the university that she was supposed to go to. She married another bureaucrat who came from exactly the same family background. She had her bureaucratic job for years and years and years. That is what she knew. And she, even though she started to understand certain things and had the miracle of having her conscience shift a bit by seeing things. Can you imagine, just to try to see it from her point of view, how difficult it might be to even get to the place of wrestling with your conscience when what you're doing, you've been told your whole life, is good It's the right thing to be doing. So she's wrestling with, well, if I speak out on this, I may lose everything that I have. And this includes an amazing pension. And Alan has said before about this particular bureaucrat. When it comes time to retire, and I've actually met a few of these kinds of people who they work for the system their whole life, and then they're basically re-educated. They're taught how to retire. You'll lose certain perks of working for bureaucracy. So this is how you compensate. This is how you live your life at a slightly different level on the system. And when she understood, talking to Alan, that he didn't have any kind of guaranteed pension, he didn't have a health plan, she said, I don't know how you people live. So you are looking at people that are very different than you. And I think the bureaucratic class is even more, if you want to say it, special than the politicians. Politicians are a dime a dozen. They're limelight seekers often. I was digging into a little bit of the politician that Alan was talking about in this episode that I am playing for you. And it's really kind of disgusting. If you want to make yourself just a little bit sick to your stomach, then you can check out who was a presidential candidate back in 2007, I guess, and his name was, he was Senator Edwards. I was looking at him this afternoon, and I've already forgotten his first name, because they're disposable. Even by the time somebody becomes prime minister or president, they're just completely interchangeable, disposable, and totally forgettable. But this guy, Edwards, boy, he takes the biscuit for disgusting. Just disgusting. But it's a type. It's a type that you get. And that all, too, is part of the circus. It's part of the media circus, what you're looking at. And one popped into mind that I had seen not too long ago when it came to UFO disclosure. So she's kind of a spokesperson for odd things. And I noticed that one of the things that she is in charge of right now is some kind of MK Ultra panel, what is that called? I'm going to see if I can look it up right now. Okay, here it is. This is the Luna, that's her name. Luna, moon, lunatic. Paulina Luna, a Republican from Florida, announced today, this is June 23, 2026, a hearing on mind control and accountability, uncovering the truth of the CIA's MK-Ultra experiments. During the hearing, members will examine the history and timeline of the Central Intelligence Agency CIA MK-Ultra project and its original classification, and how the project meets the CIA's obligation to protect the United States. Now, I'm just going to say about a hearing like this, hey, we are all under mind control. If you want to think that MK-Ultra is this amazing, really cool conspiracy theory thing that you want to talk about, that's fine. And here is the authorized politician to lead that part of the circus for you. I want to put up an article about her because she popped up on my news feed a couple of months ago, or maybe it's probably a couple months ago. She said that she didn't say that UFOs or aliens were demons necessarily, but she described them as interdimensional beings, and then she connected them to biblical texts and religious concepts. Now, this is an operation. These are talking points. You'll hear the same thing from Catherine Austin Fitts. They're talking points. She talks about interdimensional beings. And so that's trendy. You see, it's trending to talk about demons and interdimensional beings, and here's your politician doing that. So, Anna Paulina Luna, born in 1989, she is U.S. Representative, a Congresswoman of Florida's 13th Congressional District, first Mexican-American woman elected to Congress from Florida. She served as an airfield management specialist in the Air National Guard from age 19. And then it goes on to, she was awarded an Air Force Achievement Medal, and it talks about the family. And this is an interesting thing here. I think I'm not really sure why she's bringing it up, but it's interesting to me. Luna has said that her father was raised her to follow Messianic Judaism, an evangelical movement that incorporates Jewish traditions into Protestant Christianity, and that she is a small fraction Ashkenazi. But members of her extended family have denied this claim, saying her father was Catholic, and they were not aware of him practicing any form of Judaism while Luna was growing up. Her mother has said that Luna's father was a Christian who embraced the Messianic faith after getting clean from drug addiction. So I think she's just been given some interesting talking points, is what I think. But I will leave you with what they used to call back in the day a cheesecake shot of her. There is Luna in a bathing suit. I have to read the sign on it across her figure there, but oh, there it is. Make America Great Again. That was her modeling shot before she ran for Congress, and she posed for Maxim and Sports Illustrated while she was still considered a GOP influencer. So we live in a little bit of a circus, for sure, and I, am just happy to have the sanity of old Alan Watt talks that I can return to time and again. And I think if I can find, I think I'll just repeat this Alan Greenspan quote here. I was going to look for something else, but this one is just it's too good. I guess I should warn you, if I turn out to be particularly clear, you've probably misunderstood what I said. See, we live in a system that deliberately obfuscates, that claims to reveal while it conceals. And the more time you spend trying to look for clues and ferret things out in this system, the likelier you are to be caught there, never to be seen in the world of the bird's eye view. So thank you for your support. I hope that you will all, I know that many of you still don't have the second edition of Alan's Cutting Through books, so I hope you will all consider that. And I do still have flash drives, and of course you are welcome to just go over to cuttingthroughthematrix.com and take advantage of the fact that there are thousands of hours of Alan's talks, and there are transcripts there for free download. Take care.
I'm Alan Watt, and this is Cutting Through the Matrix. It is September the 10th, 2007. For those who are newcomers to the show, please check in to cuttingthroughthematrix.com, my website. And for European listeners, they can download transcripts in their own tongues at Alan Watt, Sentient, Sentinel. It's funny watching the world go round and round like a big circus with all the politicians doing their grandstanding and going through routines which were invented long ago, routines which work with the public because the public like to hear promises from fathers or Big Brother. It's something for nothing, they hope. Even though they're paying through the nose for everything, through their taxes, they still think they're going to get something for nothing. If it's free, they'll come. And that's happened, of course, with the free flu shots. When they first started to advertise them, we saw on the television rows of seniors lining up for their free flu shots and having fights when they're waiting in the queue because they're all terrified they'd run out of shots before it was their turn. And that's how fast this little veneer of civilization can crumble. We are in a circus, and the circus is the Matrix. It's a big stage play with politicians being picked long before you've even heard their names to fulfill a role and act a part to the public. All the world's a stage, and they are but the players, as has been said before. The public, of course, is also participating in the stage play because they must pretend to believe it all, and even get so far as to try and convince their friends and families to believe in it too. People argue over such things as politics, never knowing that the whole thing is just a scam, because we have no freedoms as we have been brainwashed to believe in. We have just a certain range of movement before we're hauled in back to the center. Most people never get far enough from the center to find out there's actual barriers out there. But when they try, people will appear suddenly they've never seen before to usher them back in or else. That's the system. It's very rigid. And most people are oblivious to it because they're all playing inside the big circle. We see this with people like with Edwards, who's campaigning at the moment, John Edwards, who's got a face for every type of group that he's addressing, and he has a script writer probably specializing in every group. So they know what script to write for the teenagers, the students, for the adults and the middle-aged and the very elderly, a different script for every type, and he'll tell them what I want to hear. Very old technique, but here's from the Associated Press, the writer's son, September the 2nd, and I'll read this little spiel that he gave out recently on September the 2nd to a crowd, I think it was in Iowa, back after the following messages. Hi folks, Alan Watt back here with Cutting Through the Matrix, talking about the farce we see every few years with the politicians doing their campaigning, their little acting part to get into the bigger house. I don't know if it's the same in the United States, but you find in all Western countries, including Canada, a politician can get in for 5 years to get a lifelong pension. And that's not a bad deal, isn't it? Good work if you can get it. They get full benefits. They get an index-related pension for the rest of their lives, so the cost of living goes up. They get that going up too. And it's no wonder you see that it attracts certain types of personalities into it. You can't really get honest people going in. But getting back to Mr. Edwards, it was a good study in the personality of the politician with his promises. At this speech he gave in Iowa, a trip in Iowa, he said it requires, this is about his health care, he wants to make it universal, but mandatory for everyone in the U.S. to be covered. So it requires that everybody be covered. It requires that everybody get preventative care. Very important to understand what he's saying here, preventative care. That means that you're going to be bossed around by various experts, measured and weighed and examined whenever they say you must be. That's what that means. And he told this to a crowd sitting in lawn chairs in front of like Cedar County Courthouse. If you're going to be in the system, you can't choose not to go to the doctor for 20 years. Now, the thing is, you see, we're all in the system. We haven't been given a choice not to be in the system. You were born into the system. So it continues, you have to go in and be checked and make sure that you're okay. He noted, for example, that women were required to have regular mammograms in an effort to find and treat the first trace of problem. Edwards and his wife, Elizabeth, announced earlier this year that her breast cancer had returned and spread. Now, you can bet your bottom dollar, you see, his wife has been checked probably every few months for many, many years, and it didn't stop this from happening to her. And that's what they've also found in studies in Canada and other countries, but they keep doing it because it's a big business, you see. And it also trains the public to obey and come in and be terrified they're always going to find something, even though you might get the cancer a month after the test. Edwards said his mandatory health care plan would cover preventative, chronic, and long-term health care. The plan would include mental health. Now, listen to this. It would include mental health care as well as dental and vision coverage for all Americans. Now, remember, you've got to really analyze the wording, because these characters who write the scripts are often lawyers, and there's another meaning behind it, because we know they want to give everyone psychological examination on an annual basis, don't they? The whole idea is a continuum of health care, basically from birth to death. He said, well, that was what they called socialism, as an expertly run society from cradle to grave, you see. The former North Carolina senator said all presidential candidates talking about health care ought to be asked one question: does your plan cover every single American? Because if it doesn't, it should be made to explain what child, what woman, what man in America is not worthy of health care, he said. Well, they really cared up till now, right? Because in my view, everybody is worth health care. Edwards said his plan would cost up to $120 billion a year, a cost he proposes covering by ending President Bush's tax cuts to people who make more than $200,000 per year. Now, when they brought in the income tax, the temporary tax, you see that you now have intergenerationally now, it's permanent. They said the same thing then. It would only affect the rich who would pay taxes. It's the same in Britain when they brought up the temporary war tax, which sort of stuck to the public ever since. It just doesn't die away. So once again, you're being conned and lied to, because the rich never have themselves taxed. There's always a loophole put in there. This was found out, for instance, when the royal family admitted, only because there were some hounds on their tail to try and find the history of all the royalty that was being kept and supported by the British public. And they found that Prince Philip, that came from Greece, who married the Queen, had about 80 members of the family he brought over, and they were all getting about £1 million per year at that time. That's a lot of money back then. And the public demanded, of course, that they either support themselves or do something for the money. And so the Queen proposed to have herself taxed, but she was getting massive grants from the government. The Man Alive program then did a little documentary on this very topic, and lo and behold, they went to the auditors that did the Queen's taxation, and they couldn't get past the gate. And all the Queen's money and all the Queen's men simply worked through the Cayman Islands and all kinds of islands far away and tropical. So they always build in a loophole to it. And at least Elton John at the time spoke on behalf of them and said, well, he says, they always make loopholes for we, the wealthy. He said, we never suffer. So this nonsense that those over $200,000 per year will pay for all the health care costs is absolute bunkum. The real reason is to get you all into this expertly run society, a society where they're going to decide whether they need you in the first place or you'll be aborted. It's a society where they want to have certain genetic types coming up, the preferable types, not the unpreferable types. You see, all the bad types. And they want to bring psychologists into it and genealogists into it. And they want to go through your hair for lice, and they want to weigh you to see if you're too heavy and make you exercise and put you on special diets. This is the new freedom. The new freedom, they call it, you see. And when you hear terms like new freedom, you better realize that they're redefining what freedom means. They never waste words, these characters, because, as I say, they're lawyers. And lawyers study words. That's their job. And how to get round things by the use of words as well. And how to deceive by the use of words. It's no coincidence a lawyer is awful close to a liar, is it? So there you go. So it doesn't matter whether it's Hillary or one of the other ones that pushes for this. This is the mandate, is to get everyone run by specialists from cradle to grave. Now, Britain was way ahead of this before any other country. And even when I went to school, they used to bring in the health authorities that would lock the door in the classroom. And they'd go through your hair and weigh you and measure you for your height. Then they'd bring dentists in that would sit there and poke holes through your teeth and say you had cavities after they'd almost wrenched their whole weight down through your molars with these pointed spikes. And you had no say in the matter whatsoever. And then they came in with inoculations and locked the door and made you take all that too. You see, that's the new freedom that we got in Britain. Now it's to be spread to the world. Isn't that nice? We really are a bunch of schmucks. a real bunch of schmucks, because whatever these characters propose to the public, and the public go for always, you see, if it's free, is against what you think it is. It's not for the same purpose, because they sell something for a good reason, but there's always a real reason. And you're never given the real reason until it's too late. That's the bottom line. So here they go with the circus, and that's all politics is a circus, with front men given their lines who do their acting and do public relations shots and pose for the cameras, shaking hands and all that kind of stuff. And they go through this routine every few years. You'd think we'd be sick of it by now. You'd think we'd also be sick of being taken as suckers time after time, because you never hear about the big agenda from these guys at election time. They never talk about the fact your factories are all across in China, and that these same guys and their fathers in politics were the guys who set all that up to happen. They don't talk about the unification of the Americas when they're running for office, do they? They didn't do that in Britain either, or any other European country when they were merging those countries into the European Union. Same technique, same cons, and what's even more amazing, you see, is that the public don't think to ask the obvious questions, because, you see, they have all these party followers that do it all for you, don't they? They're supposed to do all the questioning for you, but they don't. They don't. They talk about healthcare and Social Security and all this kind of stuff, or subsidies. Socialism works because the vast majority of the general public are children. Governments in ancient times had no qualms about discussing this fact that those who follow and do what they're told are basically children. Children don't want the responsibility of guiding their own lives and planning their own lives. It's too uncertain for them. They want reassurance, and so they get all these lies from the guys at the top, who have no amount of lies they can tell you to make you happy and feel good. So you can continue allowing them to make all the big decisions for you. And since they do make all the big decisions for you, you literally have no say in the outcome. We haven't seen referendums, national referendums on the unification of the Americas. It hasn't happened. But it's underway. It's already a done deal. It's a done deal. It was a done deal before the last signing of the last agreement. It was a done deal before I was born, because the Council on Foreign Relations wrote about it back in the 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s, that this was the agenda. But then the general public don't like the bad news, do they? They want to live in Hollywood fiction rather than reality. They don't want to look at the negative. They want to look at the positive, and the positive is wish fulfillment. If we just wish about it, it'll become all better. Just like Daddy taking that skin knee and kissing it, and it's all better. I'll be back after the following messages. Alan Watt here with Cutting Through the Matrix, and what a matrix it is. Many levels of it indeed. Most people are still down on the bottom, stuck on the floor. Some are just raised above the floor, trying to get something back which they never had. And others are floating near the top of the ceiling looking for the next level. There's an article that came out, which is appropriate for every country because we've been international for a long time. This is from The Guardian Unlimited, from James Orr. It says, Judge wants everyone in UK on DNA database. Wednesday, September the 5th, 2007. The entire UK population and every visitor to Britain should be put on the National DNA Database, a top judge said today. Lord Justice Sedley, one of England's most experienced appeal court judges, described the country's current concern or system as indefensible. We have a situation where if you happen to have been in the hands of the police, then your DNA is on permanent record. If you haven't, it isn't. That's broadly the picture, said Sir Stephen Sedley to the BBC. It also means that a great many people who are walking the streets and whose DNA would show them guilty of crimes go free. He said that expanding the existing database to cover the whole population had serious but manageable implications. But he warned that putting everybody's DNA on file should be for the absolutely rigorously restricted purpose of crime detection and prevention. What a joke, isn't it? What a joke. They always have, again, a good reason, plausible reason, but then it's a real reason. Britain's 12-year-old DNA database is the largest of any country in the world. That's because it's the most democratic country in the world, growing by 30,000 samples a month. According to the Home Office website, 5.2% of the UK population is on the database, compared with 0.5% in the US. The data is taken from criminal suspects now, that's not people who are guilty of crimes, or scenes of crime, and there are currently 4 million profiles held under the Criminal Justice and Police Act of 2001. Police are permitted to retain DNA samples from anyone charged with a crime. Previously, samples and fingerprints taken from those found not guilty or those who had their charge dropped had to be destroyed. Today, Shami Chakrabarti, the director of the human rights organization Liberty, warned against potential changes to how and when British authorities collected DNA data. The DNA debate reveals just how casual some people have become about the value of personal privacy, she said. A database of those convicted of sexual and violent crime is a perfectly sensible crime-fighting measure. Is it really? Is it really, folks? You know, so they always waylay you off the right or wrongs of it by giving you something partially plausible. A database of every man, woman, and child in the country is a chilling prospect, ripe for indignity, error, and abuse. A Home Office spokeswoman said the government had no plans to introduce a universal, compulsory, or voluntary national DNA database. That's contradictory to what they just said. However, the department is currently undertaking a review of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act called PACE. I love these names, PACE, P-A-C-E, 1984, which sets out the powers to take and retain biometric data. The DNA database has revolutionized the way the police can protect the public, protect the public, through identifying offenders and securing more convictions, the spokeswoman said. A lot of these spokespeople for the government, they're PR, public relations departments, who are lawyers, again using carefully chosen words, provides the police on average with around 3,500 matches each month. She said final proposals on the review were due to be published in spring next year and would take accounts of the views received during the consultation as well as those of Lord Chief Justice Sedley. The Home Office Minister Tony McNulty told BBC Radio 4 programme today, I think we are broadly sympathetic to the thrust of what he, the judge, has said. So the Home Office, you see, is the Department of Homeland Security for Britain. They call it the Home Office in the UK. I have said that myself in the past, that there is a real logic and cohesion to the point that says, well, put everybody on. But I think he probably does underestimate the practicalities, logistics, and huge civil liberties and ethics issue around that. There's no government plans to go to a compulsory database now or in the foreseeable future. Now, that's an utter lie, because for the last 20 years they've been taking extra vials of blood from everybody who goes to a clinic for any possible problem, and it's been going into a DNA database. Canada did the same thing, because 4 years ago they showed us a brand new building built in Montreal for the police of Canada, the RCMP, and it was all robotic arms coming down, taking out dozens and dozens of samples every fraction of a second. It could handle the whole country, and they tried to tell the public this multi-million-dollar facility was for the occasional hardened criminal. We're such idiots, aren't we? The way it's sold to us is just incredible. How we swallow this utter tripe time after time and deny our own sensibilities. Back after the following messages. Alan Watt back here with Cutting Through the Matrix. And just to continue with this article, it says, responding to Lord Sedley's comments, Liberal Democrat Home Affairs spokesman Nick Clegg said, whilst his total disregard for concerns about privacy and civil liberties is misplaced, At least he has the honesty to put forward a suggestion for a universal DNA database. This contrasts with the government's cloak and dagger strategy of creating a universal database behind the backs of the British people. Now, they wouldn't do that, of course, because the same people who unified Britain with Europe and lied to them for 40 years while doing so, of course, they wouldn't lie to you about this now, would they? The Information Commissioner, Richard Thomas, told Today, that's, I guess, the name of the paper, I think we have to think very long and very hard before going down the road of a universal DNA database. There are some risks involved. This approach can be really intrusive. It raises really fundamental questions about how much the state or the police knows about each of us. Well, the fact is they know pretty well everything, but not enough. You see, they cannot have a safe society. If you understand how police are trained and the whole idea of law enforcement, that's what it's called, enforcement, is used, it goes right down to predictability. For safety, every single individual must be completely understood, and they must be very predictable. Therefore, all information on you is completely necessary. It has no option but to go this route. This has been taught this way for many years now. So it's interesting as well. You take DNA and you take the Soros, like George Soros, that means really serpent or flying dragon in Greek. So you put DNA with Soros and you get Dinosaurus. So maybe we're all going the same way as dinosaur. Maybe that's the whole point of DNA. There's also a report came in that Air France is going to try biometric boarding cards. This French airline Air France said Wednesday planned to trial biometric boarding passes that will allow passengers to be fast-tracked through airports using a scan of their fingerprints. It's also doing the iris scan too. Passengers who volunteer to take part in the pilot scheme volunteer from the end of 2007 will be asked to load a digital record of their index print into an individual chip card, Air France officials told a press conference. Now, the reason I'm reading these things is because, you see, whatever happens in one country is already underway in every country. That's the point of it. We've got to stop thinking that these are local laws or national laws over there. These are international laws because every country in the West that signed the agreement under NATO and also under the anti-terrorism laws put all of this on the board, that they all have the same agenda because it is the one agenda, and every country in the West is in on it. It says here now, using scanners and dedicated check-in lanes, biometric card holders will be able to print out their own boarding pass and board the plane via an electronic gate that checks the match between the fingerprint and the one on the card. The scheme will initially be trialled for 2 months among 1,000 Air France staff on Paris-Amsterdam service to be extended to 2,000 frequent flyers on the same route. If the tests are successful, the biometric cards will be offered between 10 and 15% of Air France customers, either as a frequent flyer perk, so that's how they do it, or a paying premium, which could also be used to control access to rental cars or hotel rooms. The same trick that they used in the stores to get you all to use the cashless society when they offered you the store card. The same idea. And if you don't use a store card in a grocery stop, they penalize you by charging you extra. That's what it is. They're not really giving those with the card a discount. They're really just charging the ones who don't use the card. The one who use cash, they're charging them extra. This is a simple Pavlovian training of punishment and reward. Very, very simple. And it's amazing how cash works with people so easily. They'll save a few pennies here and there and allow the government to know everything that they purchase, including what they eat, what their little likes are, and so on. They don't seem to mind that. And that's how far down society has gone in a span of 20 years. Because at one time, people wouldn't even ask or answer questionnaires or any polls that came round. They were paranoid of them, and rightfully so, because people fought wars in the past for privacy, complete privacy. Whatever you did within your own home and your realm that didn't offend anyone else or hurt anyone else was okay. But not anymore. The government wants to know everything you're doing, buying, eating, and all the rest of it. This is total quality management here. That's what it is. And how many people have you heard in your own lives who say, I don't mind, I've nothing to hide? Well, those guys, you see, have lost their ability for survival because the right to privacy is a natural instinct for survival, personal survival. The happy slaves, on the other hand, will go along with anything, and they don't care who has any information on them as long as they can play in their own little circle on the end of that piece of string that goes round and round the pole. That's what they really are. Most folk, unfortunately, as we all know, are gone. So those who are awake have two problems. They have the elite to contend with, knowing what all the con games are, where they're heading, and all the rest of it, but they also have the vast majority of the population going along with it too. So you have to contend with the dead, the land of the dead. That's what it meant in all ages. Because most people are never truly conscious throughout their whole lives in any age. And that's a fact, folks. That is a fact. They might be nice people. They might say and do the things that you do, but really they're not conscious. And you find out when they end up taking all these cards and all the perks that are offered to them that they're not conscious and that they don't care. That's what stuns you the most. They really don't care. So yeah, you do have the elite with their agenda and all the think tanks they use. You have all the forces that are geared up to be used shortly on the public when chaos is planned to occur. And you've got the vast majority of the public who will be used under democracy to force you, the minority, along with them. That's why they chose democracy. It's not mob rule. It's just that the elite can count on the mob to do what they're told. And for those who don't do what they're told, they'll say, what's wrong with you? No one else is complaining. That's how democracy works. This was explained thousands of years ago by philosophers in Greece. You should also check out the history of ancient China, because ancient China had tried out communism, socialism, fascism, dictatorships 3,000 years ago, and recorded all of it and how it worked, and how they introduced it to the people, and how they changed it into the next phase, and so on. There's nothing new under the sun, because all of these isms are formulas which work because nothing on the planet has been so well studied as man himself. People in all ages will react the same way to the same stimuli and can be made to do the same things if the right formula is introduced in the proper sequence. That's how simple it is. Read Plato's Republic, and read the other philosophers too of ancient Greece, and you realize they knew all this stuff then. And that this science is taught to an elite crowd in all countries. The science of governance, they call it, as opposed to government. The best governed people are those who really don't know. They're being forced along a certain route. You think it's all evolving naturally and that they have something to do with it. That's the best form of government. And the best slave that they can have is the one who doesn't know he or she is a slave. To get people to go along with a particular agenda, you must come from a particular tangent that the average person, with the logic they use, would never see coming. When you want to reduce a population, you must create a problem of population or unwanted children. Therefore, you actually create promiscuity and push it. The unwanted children come along, the abortions are demanded, you start reducing the population, you dehumanize the public. That's how you do it. You push the very thing that you're targeting and telling them that you're going to free them up by giving them all these rights and new rights and freedoms. That's how you do it. Joe Average doesn't realize that. He thinks everything's happening for his or her benefit, never realizing there are very clever minds, very intelligent minds, with masses of documentation and all these formulas that'll get you to do what they want you to do. How many people have already fallen for the free nonsense, the free flu shots, the free this, the free that? In Canada, the IDA's grocery store was giving out free flu shots with every $10 worth of groceries. The thing is, you could have walked into any clinic and got it for free anyway without buying the groceries. Everybody gets in on the act. That's how it's done. They promote it. And I've talked to so many people, especially the elderly, who took these shots and came down with not only the flu, but pneumonias. One classic example was of a guy I know, and his mother ended up in the hospital, and she ended up in intensive care. When she was recovering, he went to see her and says, well, I guess you won't be taking that shot. And then she said, well, I don't know. Some people you just can't help because they can't believe for an instant that all these people who are supposed to be there, these angels of mercy, are there. They couldn't do anything to them. And so they'll do it again. They'd never learn. That's the power of conditioning. And pretty well everyone in the system in which we live has accepted the world as it's been presented or downloaded into them through masses of propaganda, masses of fictional propaganda and dramas and movies. And then they know themselves, if they do start to question one part of this matrix, it might unravel the whole reality they've come to believe in. Most people can't do that and won't do that. That's also a decision that they have come to. Most of the phone calls I get are from people who have a hard time waking up the people around them. They always start with a wife or a husband or a brother or a sister, and they spend so much energy trying to deprogram them and make them see sense. And what I try to tell them to do is don't waste your energy on those who have decided, and it is a decision, to remain in the land of the dead. That is a choice that they have made, and you have to respect that choice. No one could possibly ever say they didn't know. They don't know all the details, but they can't say they didn't know what was happening. They choose not to know all the rest of it. Respect that choice and save yourself some heartache, and look for those who are trying to learn and who are asking questions, and feed them the information gradually and carefully. Then you get a sense of accomplishment instead of frustration. You try to save those who are nearest and dearest to you. They say that birds of a feather flock together, and it's very true. Humanity is a gregarious creature. It likes to form groups and organizations that it joins because that's what it wants its worldview to be. They want sameness. They want uniformity, one form. Whether they're coming from the left, the right, the top, or the bottom, or from the diagonal, they still want everyone in their group to look, be, dress, and speak the same as they do. That's the sad fact of humanity. They'd rather be in large groups rather than be individuals. In fact, groups can't really tolerate individualism at all. Even those who think they're rebelling against a system, or even those in the gender wars who join their group, they've just lost their individuality by doing so. Now they'll be used for political purposes, and they'll never really fathom out the bottom of it for themselves. Every group is used because it's far easier, according to Arnold Toynbee and others who were masters at this whole technique, far easier to control vast groups of people than the occasional individual that thinks. We have one crack at the world, and you're in it right now. You have to use it for the best purposes you possibly can, and be content with the fact that most people will use their life to simply play, enjoy themselves, allow someone else to be slaughtered somewhere else with their tax money, and that is their decision. For those in religion, they always hope that everyone gets their just rewards. But again, there's no proof that that happens, is there? Especially when you look at the elite and their genealogies that go back for thousands of years, and how they intermarry down through the centuries. They marry power, wealth, and keep it all in the families. And they seem to be doing pretty good. They don't seem to be suffering. They don't seem to be too worried either. So what you do in this life is important because you can change it for the future, for those yet to come. A sad comment on the world right now is that most people are so hedonistic, they don't care about those who are young or those who are yet to be born. They really don't care as long as they can get to a pensionable age and go fishing and put their feet up and die before the worst of the you-know-what hits the fan. That's the reality of most people. So I don't talk to most people. I talk to those who have something called spirit. That's the animating force in them. They have something that others don't. In many, many ancient holy books, they mentioned it in many ways. Those creatures of instinct were those who simply were earthbound. They loved the world, the things of the world, pleasure, fun, and they didn't want any big problems to deal with. Nothing really has changed along that way. But with some people, they have heart and compassion. You don't realize that compassion is a survival mechanism for everyone. When there's no compassion there, then a species is doomed. It can't survive because whatever's knocking off those guys over yonder will eventually.
Everybody knows that the dice are loaded.
Alan Watt back here with Cutting Through the Matrix now. Before the show is up, I should mention that I don't get paid for the shows I do. Never have from any of the radio or television shows. I do this because I feel a need to do it. So I'm doing something that is right. And for those who wish to help me keep going, they can certainly donate money. Look into the website. For those who don't have the books and CDs and DVDs I have for sale, look them up and put in an order. That keeps me going. That keeps me coming back with this information. That was not a rah-rah cheerleading type conversation I have because I leave the good endings and happy endings to Hollywood writers. That's what they've trained you all in. People always look for the happy ending. Meanwhile, they do nothing to help it come about. They expect someone else to do it for them. And the reason I do speak out to those who can understand and who are looking and who are questioning is because it doesn't take a lot of people to at least sway the course we're on. That's how history has been thwarted in the past. The agenda would have been here long ago if the occasional people, the right people here and there, hadn't deflected the agenda. You would realize they wanted a global government. At the end of World War I, they wrote about it at the top. Many lords at the British government and establishment wrote that they needed a world war to bring in global government and bring the public of all countries to their knees under a new scientific type of dictatorship. Because they're a benevolent dictatorship according to themselves. The psychopaths always rationalize what they do under benevolence. The few, always in all ages, can deflect this. The side effect for the general bulk of the population is that they can come through into a new society or a different way and at least keep their toys and their happiness and their customs, etc., until the society becomes totally corrupted again. And it's just a cycle we keep going through. The psychopaths in all countries and all nations have run the world for a long, long time. They always get to the top by their very natures. They're addicted to power. They're attracted to it like a magnet. And they go for it. And that's why we get the same MO all down through history of totalitarianism at every step of the way. The problem today is we're at the very end of of a phase of this that took centuries in the planning, by the way, to bring about. And so they've corralled most of the world's population into a mindset of compliance, passive compliance with everything. They've trained them not to participate in anything except the programs that they do encourage, like jogging in the streets and big crowds, etc., but not to participate in the direction of society as such. It took training to make that happen, and most of the public are quite content with it. They're content to be happy slaves. So for those who are not, tune in again on Wednesday, and we'll go further into this technique of mind control for the masses. From Hamish, my dog, myself up here in Northern Ontario, it's good night, and may your God or your gods go with you.